Happy Halloween, everybody. So I'm glad to bring you this one-off episode where I discuss cases. And as it gets darker here, all my lights are going to be turned off and all my candles are going to be lit. So it's going to be glittering in here and it's going to be spooky. And I'm really getting into the spirit of Halloween. And the thriller video is going to be playing. So it's going to be really fun. And I just wanted to bring you this special episode because, I've talked a lot about other creators over the past few weeks, and I want to get back to talking about cases again. And where I come from with talking about these true Crama cases, is I look at the psychopathy, psychology, pathology of the human condition, the human mind, the human brain, what circumstances each individual is in, rather than the more Halloween-style, gorier details. So I just wanted to let you know that before this starts. So this is where I can get back to what I originally started doing on this channel, which is discussing cases instead of talking about other creators. And I'm using the theme of Halloween as an excuse to talk about cases that I'm interested in. And there's a lot of cases that I like, and a lot of cases that intrigue me, a lot of cases that I know about. And in this episode, I'm going to focus on the Chris Watts case, the Jodi Arias case, and the Scott Peterson case. But first of all, I want to talk about O.J. and Nicole Simpson, because the O.J. Simpson case is referred to as the trial of the century. And people were enthralled and fascinated by this case. And I'm going to explain why I think people were fascinated by this case. First of all, this case had the law of money, wealth, celebrity, and sports. So for that reason alone, it was intriguing to people. Then you had a very attractive couple, a man with a lot of money, tall, dark, handsome. Some people say, well, O.J. Simpson wasn't handsome, but it depends on what your idea of handsome is. For me, O.J. Simpson was an attractive man. And then you've got Nicole, who was very attractive, statuesque, a very attractive woman. And you've got also the fact that he was older, she was younger. They lived in Brentwood, so it has that Hollywood factor. And then you've got the facade of the nice, beautiful house on Rockingham Avenue. With the contrast of that is the actual Crama itself, So there are so many myths about this case, and I might do a special episode on this case one day, I don't know when. But one of the myths about this case is that O.J. Simpson was constantly following Nicole. I can tell you that's not true. That is not true at all. First of all, O.J. Simpson had a career. Nicole didn't. And I'm not sticking up for O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson is narcissistic, he's egotistical, and he's arrogant. But he wasn't following her everywhere. O.J. Simpson could have the pick of the bunch. He was dating a woman a decade younger than Nicole Simpson. Her name was Paula Barbieri. She was a model. During the time of the split, he was dating somebody else who was 10 years younger than Nicole. He also traveled a lot. He was hardly ever home in the latter years of their marriage. He was always somewhere else, whether it was, for an acting gig, or he was commentating on a sports match, or he was just simply traveling. And he had many other women. This wasn't somebody who was a one-woman man. So O.J. Simpson had better things to do than follow Nicole Simpson around everywhere. And that's one of the myths that I want to, set straight. And I know that it's not popular, but, there's so many myths about this case and misconceptions about this case. And I want to set that straight, that O.J. Simpson had a very fun-filled life. Nicole Simpson was living in a lovely house that she didn't pay a cent for. She had one job during their romantic interlude, or their romantic time together, and she worked at the Daisy. That's where they met. But after working at the Daisy, she never really did anything else. Sometimes she did interior decorating for friends of OJ's, but she was very much a kept woman who had a wonderful lifestyle. They vacationed in Hawaii, Palm Springs, They had houses in other parts of California, Orange County, I think one in Laguna. Nicole Simpson had a wonderful life, but the life was marred by domestic issues. And I will talk about that another time. But there are so many myths about this case alone. And I've done extensive research on this case. And I'm not saying that I know everything about this case or more than anybody else, but there are a lot of myths about this particular case. The other thing I want to touch on with the O.J. Simpson case before I get started on these three is the idea that O.J. Simpson was begging for Nicole to come back to him. That wasn't true. It turned out that it was found out later that Nicole Simpson was the one who wanted O.J. Simpson back. And I think it's partly because she was running out of money. That's my personal opinion. She didn't get the hefty sum that Tiger Woods' wife got. She got much less. And she'd never had a job. And she didn't know how to, she didn't have the tools to survive in the world on her own. And she'd always leaned on O.J. Simpson. So there are two things, other myths, that he was pining for her and wanted her back. It was actually her that actually wrote a letter to him asking him to come back to her. And I'll touch on that at another time. Chris Watts, Jodi Arias, and Scott Peterson are all similar characters, in my opinion. Neither of them had any record, any previous record. They all came across well-spoken, soft-spoken. None of them had any prior record. So that's one of the things that all of these three have in common. The other thing that Chris Watts, Jodi Arias, and Scott Peterson have in common is that they are pathological liars. And all three of them. And that to me is a great sign of somebody who is not innocent, or not innocent as they claim to be or appear to be. I think all three of these cases have to do with the relationships that they were in. With Jodi Arias, she wanted to hang on to Travis Alexander because her life was really going nowhere. She was attractive, but that's all she had. She never had any success. She couldn't string anything together. She didn't have a career. She didn't have a clear direction. She was kind of jumping from one thing to the next, one relationship to the next, and she was directionless. And Travis Alexander had direction in his life. He was living in a nice house in Arizona. He had a good job. She wanted that lifestyle. She wanted that security. She wanted that validation. And she was never going to get it from Travis Alexander because Travis wanted her for one thing and one thing only. And when she realized that she was never, ever going to be his serious partner or his wife, she took the steps that she did. And I think she probably planned it. I think the same thing with Chris Watts. I think he planned it before he did it. And I think with Chris Watts is that he felt trapped in a marriage that he couldn't get out of. If he had taken the proper steps to get out of the marriage, he would have been left penniless. So I think what he did it because he wanted to hang on to NK. And I think he wanted to financially gain as well. This is somebody who wasn't in love with his wife anymore. He was in love with another woman, was happier with another woman, and was not in a very good financial position. And he had a better choice in his mind. Get a woman, be with a woman. He could finally be with a woman that he actually felt on a more equal playing ground with, that he was more attracted to, and that he could, actually have some money in his pocket, because during the marriage with Shanann, his finances weren't great, were they? It's almost like she was spending all of his money. But then again, we can look at that in different ways. I mean, he wasn't in a good financial position. So I believe that there were two motives in the Chris Watts case. I believe he wanted to be with another woman, which was NK. And I think that he wanted to gain financially. With Scott Peterson, I think that he was not in love with Lacey Peterson anymore. He was really besotted with Amber Fry. And he wanted to, he didn't want to be a father. I think it's very clear that he didn't want to be a father. He wouldn't have done what he did if he wanted to be a father. I mean, who goes fishing by themselves when their wife is about to have a baby? Think about it. Who goes fishing by themselves when their wife is about to have a baby on Christmas Eve? That's fishy in itself. He told Amber Fry that he'd lost his wife before she was even lost. Both Scott Peterson and Jodi Arias have had their appeals rejected, and they have no hope whatsoever. This picture speaks volumes, and it was used in the Peterson trial. You have Scott, pregnant wife on the right, attending a Christmas party. And you have Scott's girlfriend, Amber, with Scott Peterson's arms around her, attending another Christmas party on the same night. Scott Peterson told his wife, Lacey, that he couldn't go to this party. He had a business trip. And he was actually going to another Christmas party with his girlfriend, Amber Fry. And to me, this picture speaks volumes as to what was going on in Scott Peterson's head and what he really wanted. What he really wanted was Amber Fry. Who he really wanted to be with was Amber Fry. What he didn't want was Lacey, who was sitting on the right. As you can see, she was pregnant, and she was actually about 7 to 8 months pregnant at the time this photograph was taken. And there she is, sitting in a seat at a Christmas party, all on her own. And she actually believes that her husband is on a business trip, but he's actually at a party with Amber Fry. I think, for me, the Scott Peterson case was clear-cut from the very beginning. It's a logical case. Now, there's arguments for and against. There are discussions for and against. There's some people who think that this is innocent, that this is just a guy who was doing what many men do. But I think there's a lot more to it than that because of the things he said to Amber Fry. He told Amber before Lacey went missing that he'd lost his wife and this would be the first Christmas without her. This was when Lacey was at home preparing for the birth of their child. They set up a nursery. So he told Amber that he'd lost his wife before Lacey was even lost. Lacey was home and well and preparing for the birth of her baby and thought her marriage was wonderful. There's something else that he told Amber Fry during a phone call. And he told Amber that he didn't want kids. And yet his wife was pregnant. That's another thing that's very symbolic to me and very indicative. But there was also something else that he did that to me defies logic if you're innocent, is that he, on the night there was a vigil for Lacey, he called Amber before the vigil started, and he said he was in Paris, standing by the Eiffel Tower, listening to music, having a great time. And he wasn't. He was in San Modesto. He was in Modesto, actually, not San Modesto, Modesto, in America, near San Francisco, in California. He wasn't in Paris. He wasn't traveling in Europe. I think Scott Peterson is one of the most, I think he thinks he's smart and he thinks he's intelligent, but I don't think he has any common sense intelligence because he's so pathological and so disingenuous that he actually doesn't believe that people can see through him. He recently got his appeal rejected, but he's no longer at San Quentin in California. And he'll remain behind for the rest, for the remainder of his life. And I think that his case was a very clear-cut case. And like I said, there's lots of people who think otherwise. But for me, this is one of the most logical cases. It's very clear, even looking at this photograph and then understanding the background to this case, it's very clear what Scott Peterson wanted. And I think it's very sad that Lacey had no idea. She had no idea. Here she was preparing for the birth of her first child with a man that she loved. She just had no idea what her husband was doing. So anyway, I've enjoyed discussing these cases with you, and there might be a part two of this. There may not be. And this was just a chance for me to give you my opinions, not necessarily in-depth opinions, but my loose opinions on these cases. I think a lot of these cases are subject to interpretation, and they're also subject to your own experiences in life. You know, our own experiences are used to lend our opinions on a lot of things in life, you know, whether you're male, female, what part of the world you live in, what religion you are. All of these things, our life experiences, our experiences with relationships, all of these things affect our opinions on these cases. And I've enjoyed discussing them today.